The day I fell began with cheers, ended in shame. I'm Marcus, a king in a San Francisco boardroom, sunlight blazing over the skyline. As cybersecurity master, I unveiled my unbreakable code, forged in sweat, my voice cut sharp. My team's eyes glowed with loyalty, especially my ally. Nodding fiercely, the room bowed to my genius, every word crushing doubt. But heels stabbed the silence. The door crashed open. My brother in arms stormed in, eyes icy, with security like reapers. He roared treason, accusing me of selling secrets. Gasps erupted. Colleagues' glares cut deep. Fake evidence my signature choked my defense. My confidante bowed her head, mute, dragged past sneers. Clutching my career's ruins, I was cast into the city's cold. That day stole my honor, but ignited a fire. The day I lost everything began with applause and ended in humiliation. That morning, I stood confidently in the sleek, glass-walled conference room on the 23rd floor, overlooking San Francisco's bustling financial district. Sunlight streamed through pristine windows, illuminating rows of attentive faces. As head of cybersecurity, this moment was my triumph, the culmination of sleepless nights and relentless testing. I adjusted my tie, briefly meeting the supportive gaze of Laura, my closest colleague and friend, who subtly nodded encouragement from across the table. Behind me, a screen showcased the robust encryption protocol I'd painstakingly developed, a system impenetrable even to the most seasoned hackers. My voice carried clear and steady, each word carefully chosen, the room filling with quiet admiration. I was just detailing the final layer of my defense mechanism when a sudden, sharp click of heels echoed from the corridor outside. The door burst open abruptly. Andrew Hayes stood framed in the doorway, his dark eyes steely, devoid of any warmth. He stepped purposefully into the room, flanked by two uniformed security officers, their expressions as unreadable as stone masks. "Sorry to interrupt, Marcus?" Andrew's voice sliced through the stunned silence. "But I'm afraid your presentation is over." My breath caught in my throat. Andrew wasn't merely a colleague. He was someone I'd considered a trusted ally, someone I'd vouched for when others questioned his overly aggressive methods. Seeing him like this, cold and calculated, was disorienting, as though reality itself had tilted on its axis. Andrew faced the room, lifting a sleek black tablet. "Marcus Allen," he announced, his voice loud, unwavering, almost theatrical, "has betrayed this company by leaking sensitive data to our biggest competitor." Gasps erupted around me, shocked murmurs igniting like wildfire. My heart slammed painfully against my chest. "That's impossible," I managed, voice shaking. "There must be some mistake." But Andrew calmly tapped the screen. Behind him, the main display suddenly showed detailed logs, file names, timestamps, all bearing my personal digital signature. The proof looked authentic, undeniable. I glanced desperately toward Laura, my closest friend, certain she would speak up, offer a lifeline, but instead, her eyes met mine for a fleeting moment before quickly dropping to the table. Cheeks flushed red with embarrassment or worse, guilt. My chest tightened further. Betrayal tasted bitter, metallic. "Andrew," I pleaded softly, turning back to him, trying to find any hint of hesitation, but his expression remained ruthless, a stranger hidden behind familiar features. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. "Security. Please escort Mr. Allen out immediately." Two firm hands grasped my shoulders, gently but firmly guiding me out of the room. My legs felt weak, the hallway impossibly long. As I was marched past rows of cubicles, heads turned, conversations died abruptly, and whispers followed. Every step echoed harshly against polished marble floors, amplifying my humiliation with unbearable clarity. Outside the building, clutching a cardboard box hastily filled with personal belongings, I stood frozen amidst the bustling city street, invisible to passers-by, yet feeling exposed, shattered, and utterly alone. The sunlight that had seemed so bright and promising earlier now felt cruelly mocking. I had lost not just my job, reputation, or career, but something deeper, more fundamental: my faith in the people I once trusted completely. As security guided me from the conference room, I heard our CEO, Robert Mitchell, clear his throat deliberately, a harsh sound that froze everyone in place. "I deeply regret this breach of trust," he proclaimed, his voice colder than I'd ever known it, each word measured and piercing. His eyes, briefly locking onto mine, were distant and impersonal, as if I were no longer a person, but merely an inconvenient problem. Let Marcus Allen's removal today serve as a stark reminder no one is above the integrity of this company. Every syllable stabbed deeper, stripping away my dignity in front of my peers. Behind me, the silence broke into tense murmurs. I felt hot embarrassment spreading up my neck, cheeks burning painfully as my vision blurred for a split second. Holding the cardboard box filled hastily with my belongings, my hands trembled uncontrollably, my palms slick with sweat. Each step away from that conference room was heavier than the last, the polished marble floor echoing mercilessly beneath my feet. As I moved past rows of cubicles, a suffocating silence engulfed the entire office, broken only by hesitant coughs and the awkward scraping of chairs as colleagues turned to watch the spectacle unfold. My peripheral vision betrayed me. I saw faces once full of friendship and respect turn cold, distant, or suddenly fascinated by the floor beneath their desks. Laura, my closest friend and ally, stared pointedly at her keyboard, her fingers frozen mid-typing, clearly avoiding eye contact. A painful knot twisted in my stomach as I realized the depth of my isolation. Someone whispered sharply, "Always seemed too good to be true." Another murmured back, "Guess we never really knew him." Their words, though softly spoken, felt loud enough to shatter glass. My pulse thundered wildly in my ears, drowning out everything except the relentless rhythm of humiliation. In that dreadful moment, a chilling thought flashed through my mind. What comes next? Who hires someone publicly branded a traitor? The elevator doors opened, and security gently but firmly ushered me inside. When the doors finally slid shut, sealing me away from those accusing stares, I slumped heavily against the cool mirrored wall. For a moment, I stared numbly at my own reflection, eyes wide, haunted, filled with raw shame and disbelief, barely recognizing the man looking back at me. The proud professional who entered the building just an hour ago was now nothing more than a broken stranger. As I stepped out of the building's front entrance, the midday sun of San Francisco hit me like a cruel spotlight, highlighting every painful detail of my humiliation. I stood frozen on the crowded sidewalk, my hands trembling as they gripped the cardboard box containing the last remnants of nearly a decade-long career. My head spun, dizzy with disbelief, breath coming in short, shallow bursts, heart pounding erratically. Around me, the city continued its bustling rhythm. Indifferent to my personal catastrophe, a man walked past, casting a brief, curious glance tinged with uncomfortable sympathy, then quickly moved on. Eager to avoid the awkwardness of my misery, I felt utterly exposed, defenseless under the scrutiny of strangers who neither knew nor truly cared. My phone vibrated incessantly, flooded by notifications from social media. Reluctantly, I glanced at the screen. Images of me leaving the company had spread like wildfire, accompanied by hundreds of mocking comments, harsh judgments, and even critical remarks from those I once trusted. Each message felt like a knife twisting deeper into an already fresh wound. My trembling fingers navigated to my recent messages. Pausing at Laura's name, my throat tightened painfully as I reread our conversation from the previous night. Her last message glowing brightly on the screen. "You'll do great tomorrow. Marcus, I'm always proud of you." My hands shook violently as I began typing, "Laura, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you defend me?" But my finger hovered hesitantly above the send button, finally falling away. Unable to complete the action, I switched off the screen, overcome by helplessness and despair. Feeling drained and disoriented, I stumbled toward a nearby bench and sank onto it heavily. Opening the box, I found a few technical books, a small picture frame, and miscellaneous office supplies. I lifted the framed photograph, a snapshot from last year's company anniversary celebration. The image showed me smiling broadly between Laura and Andrew, the three of us radiating joy and confidence. Memories surged painfully, those long nights spent side by side, battling critical security breaches, promising we would always have each other's backs no matter what. I'd genuinely believed in those words. My fingers tightened instinctively around the photo, waves of bitterness and anger overtaking me. Without thinking further, I crushed the picture in my fist, feeling the paper wrinkle and crumple beneath the pressure, mirroring my shattered trust. With an angry flick of my wrist, I tossed it into the nearby trash bin. A woman sitting nearby glanced sharply toward me, her eyes filled with wary judgment, causing me to shrink further into myself, sitting alone beneath an indifferent sky. I bitterly realized that everything I'd built, everything I'd trusted, had evaporated in mere moments. I wasn't sure how I would continue living from this moment forward, but I knew for certain that I would never again be the person I'd been just a few hours earlier. Something fundamental inside me had died at the very moment they publicly branded me a traitor, and now, somehow, I had to find a way to live with that painful truth. The days following my dismissal blurred into an endless cycle of confusion and despair. My small apartment in downtown San Francisco, once a haven, now seemed more like a prison, silent, suffocating, and devoid of comfort. Curtains drawn tightly shut kept the outside world at bay, plunging every room into perpetual twilight. I tried everything to numb my mind: mindless television, aimless scrolling on my phone, but the silence remained relentless, magnifying every painful memory. Andrew's cold accusation, Laura's silent betrayal, the judgmental eyes of my former colleagues all replayed endlessly, each repetition sharper and more haunting. One sleepless evening, exhausted yet unable to find peace, I dragged myself into the kitchen. Mechanically, I brewed coffee, the familiar aroma oddly comforting yet painfully reminding me of my past morning routine. Hands trembling, I lifted the cup to my lips, the bitter taste jolting me back into stark reality. I rubbed my temples vigorously, desperately trying to ease the persistent ache that had settled deep within my skull. I stared vacantly at my reflection in the kitchen window, the glass reflecting back a tired, broken stranger. But in that quiet moment, a long-forgotten voice echoed suddenly in my mind, my father's gentle yet firm tone. "When the world turns against you, Marcus, trust your instincts and fight for the truth, even if you're standing alone." Those words resonated within me, sparking something that had lain dormant beneath layers of self-pity and hopelessness. Why had I surrendered so easily, allowing them to strip away my identity and dignity? Anger surged through my veins, sharp and invigorating. I slammed my fist against the countertop, pain shooting sharply up my arm, snapping me fully awake. Drawing strength from that momentary clarity, I moved decisively toward my desk, booting up my laptop for the first time since the humiliating incident. As the screen flickered to life, my pulse quickened. I opened a fresh document, rapidly outlining everything I recalled about Andrew's supposed evidence. My mind raced, each detail falling neatly into place. It dawned on me how peculiar and perfectly timed those logs had appeared, data transfers that occurred during times I was unquestionably offline. Timestamps meticulously altered. A system as complex and sophisticated as the one I'd built wouldn't betray me so blatantly, not without deliberate manipulation. I leaned back, inhaling deeply, the realization hitting me like lightning. Andrew was the only person, aside from myself, capable enough and trusted enough to navigate and alter our security protocols unnoticed. The intricate encryption layers, once my pride and joy, had become a cruel maze, shielding the very man who betrayed me. A surge of dread mingled with determination filled my chest. My mind momentarily flashed forward to the consequences should my plan fail. The stakes were terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just about restoring my reputation. If I misstepped now, I could face criminal charges, even imprisonment. But the alternative, accepting defeat, living with the false label of traitor, was something I simply couldn't endure. Swallowing hard, I made my choice. I would confront Andrew's deception directly, peeling back every layer of lies until the truth was laid bare. This was no longer about revenge or redemption alone. This was about reclaiming my integrity, my name, my life. For the first time in days, clarity replaced despair. I was no longer willing to remain passive, whatever the cost. I was ready to fight. Late that night, When San Francisco had finally drifted into a quieter rhythm, I sat hunched over my desk in the dim glow of my laptop, preparing to breach the system I'd once built to be invincible. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly, slick with cold sweat. Each keystroke seemed heavier than the last, weighed down by the irony of hacking into defenses I'd once proudly declared impenetrable. As I logged in, memories rushed back vividly. Long nights spent hunched over the same keyboard, fueled by endless cups of bitter coffee and relentless determination. I remembered clearly that one particular night when I cracked the final encryption algorithm at dawn. The exhausted triumph etched permanently in my mind. Now that memory felt like a cruel joke, twisted into a weapon used against me. Navigating past the initial firewall was straightforward. I knew exactly which hidden pathways I'd designed for emergency maintenance access. Yet, the deeper I delved, the more my pulse quickened. My system was intentionally complex, a multi-layered labyrinth designed to trap even the most cunning intruders. Now, I was the intruder, forced to outsmart my own security protocols. My breathing grew heavier, anxiety tightening my chest as I encountered more sophisticated security layers. But gradually, I maneuvered around each barrier. Finally, I reached the central server, the beating heart of our digital fortress. As lines of code and logs filled my screen, a familiar chill crawled down my spine. It was all here, the manipulations, the deliberate alterations. Files had been carefully modified, logs erased, timestamps meticulously adjusted to frame my digital identity. The precision was almost flawless, but my trained eyes could spot subtle inconsistencies. I scanned the data intensely, eyes narrowed with concentration. Then, suddenly, a tiny anomaly emerged clearly, a data transfer at 2:46 a.m. Using my credentials, my heart leaped sharply. At that exact moment, I'd been aboard a flight returning from a cybersecurity conference in Seattle, miles above the ground, disconnected from any network. Andrew had made a critical oversight, a microscopic yet undeniable mistake. For a brief moment, exhilaration surged through me, a rare, satisfying rush of victory. With rapid keystrokes, I copied the logs and placed digital markers to track any future alterations. Quickly, I encrypted the evidence onto a secure USB drive. I felt a small, hopeful smile creep across my lips, the first genuine feeling of relief in days. But my momentary joy was abruptly shattered. Without warning, my screen flashed red, accompanied by a sharp, high-pitched beep that sliced through the quiet room. Bright, urgent letters glared at me. Unauthorized access detected. User ID traced. My stomach lurched violently, heart hammering painfully in my chest. Andrew must have anticipated this scenario, adding additional security measures after my departure measures I'd overlooked in my desperation. My intrusion had triggered an immediate alert directly to him. Panic flooded through me, my mind racing wildly with thoughts of what came next. Andrew would surely retaliate, probably in ways I couldn't predict. I imagined the worst scenarios: arrest, public disgrace intensified, perhaps even threats to my safety. My earlier optimism evaporated instantly, replaced by a profound dread. Breathing deeply, trying to steady my trembling hands, I swiftly disconnected from the system and closed my laptop, slipping the USB drive safely into my pocket. The silence in my apartment now felt deafening, oppressive, like the quiet before a storm. I knew my next move was crucial. My margin for error had vanished entirely. Andrew now knew someone had discovered his secrets, and soon enough he'd know it was me. The confrontation I'd desperately hoped to avoid was now inevitable, and far more dangerous than I'd imagined. Standing up slowly, shoulders heavy with tension, I braced myself mentally and emotionally. There was no turning back. I had to face him directly. Sleep completely abandoned me that night. Each faint creak from the walls, every distant siren that passed, tightened the grip of paranoia around my chest. I paced the apartment restlessly, repeatedly glancing toward the laptop, haunted by the chilling security alert that had shattered my earlier optimism. I knew Andrew too well. His response would be immediate, calculated, and ruthless. As the pale dawn slowly seeped through the closed curtains, casting everything in muted gray, I sank heavily into the chair at my desk. Fatigue pressed heavily on my shoulders. My vision blurred from exhaustion. Pulling the USB drive from my pocket, I held it tightly, its small physical presence oddly reassuring, yet equally terrifying. It proved my innocence, but made me Andrew's most immediate threat. Slowly, methodically, I reopened the logs, carefully reviewing the data I'd extracted. My fingers shook slightly as I navigated deeper into the files, my heartbeat quickening with every revelation. It wasn't long before I found an encrypted communication channel, carefully hidden beneath layers of sophisticated code. As I decrypted the fragments, my breath caught sharply in my throat. Data transfer successful. Awaiting further directives. Compensation confirmed. Proceeding to Phase 2. My head spun violently, and a sudden wave of nausea washed over me, leaving me gripping the edge of the desk for support. Andrew wasn't merely undermining the company, he was actively engaged with outside entities, possibly foreign intelligence, compromising not only our data, but national security. The depth and scale of this betrayal shocked me beyond words. Suddenly, buried within another set of decrypted messages, my eyes locked onto a line from a month earlier. Target selected Marcus Allen, ideal candidate to deflect suspicion. A cold chill raced down my spine, and my heart pounded painfully against my ribs. Andrew hadn't chosen me randomly. I was deliberately targeted, set up as the perfect scapegoat. A painful memory rushed back vividly the day Andrew first welcomed me to the company. I remembered his firm handshake, reassuring smile, and comforting words when I'd felt overwhelmed and lost. The stark contrast between that memory and the cold betrayal now felt unbearably cruel. My fingers curled into tight fists, anger swelling sharply within me. But before I could act on the emotion, an instinctive, sharp anxiety took hold. Turning nervously toward the window, I scanned the street below, half expecting to see a shadowy figure watching from afar. Was I already being monitored? Had Andrew anticipated my moves, knowing exactly how I'd react? Realizing the urgency, I quickly duplicated the critical data, carefully securing a backup in a hidden cloud server only I could access. The implications were clear if anything happened to me. The truth needed to survive. I was just finishing the last encryption step when my phone vibrated suddenly, jolting my nerves. My heart nearly stopped at the caller ID, Andrew Hayes. A cold realization struck me immediately. What if Andrew already knew exactly where I was? And this call was merely his way of confirming my vulnerability. Taking a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain calm despite the turmoil inside, I answered the call. Marcus. Andrew's voice came through, unsettlingly calm, with a hint of amusement that made my blood run cold. We really need to talk. I believe we both know why. I swallowed hard, struggling to keep my composure. Every word he spoke felt like ice against my skin. Yes, Andrew, I replied carefully, fighting to keep my tone steady. I think it's about time we did. The moment the call with Andrew ended, an icy dread surged through me. His voice echoed clearly in my mind, calm, cold, and dangerously confident. I knew instantly that if I didn't act swiftly, my only chance to expose the truth would vanish. I glanced nervously at the clock, each passing second tightening its grip around my throat. There was no time left to hesitate. I had to secure concrete proof of Andrew's dark conspiracy before he erased every trace. Later that night, I parked my car 2 blocks away from Andrew's apartment, hidden beneath the shadows of dense trees to avoid detection. The cold San Francisco night bit sharply at my skin, making me painfully alert as I stepped out. My pulse hammered furiously in my chest, my breath quickened, and my hands trembled slightly as I approached the building on foot. Andrew's apartment was located on the 12th floor of an upscale condominium. Security cameras lined every hallway and staircase. Fortunately, I still vividly recalled the layout Andrew once carelessly shared with me, back when we were colleagues, oblivious to the bitter irony that I'd one day use that knowledge against him. I bypassed the front entrance, slipping quietly to the emergency staircase behind the building. The metal door groaned softly as I pushed it open. I froze for a moment, holding my breath, my heart pounding so loudly it felt as though anyone nearby would surely hear it. Slowly, cautiously, I ascended the stairs, each step resonating slightly in the oppressive silence. Cold sweat trickled down my spine as I reached the 12th floor, peering through the small window set in the stairwell door. I checked carefully. The corridor appeared empty, dimly lit by the faint glow of wall sconces. With a deep breath to steady myself, I moved quickly toward Andrew's apartment, pulling out an old backup security card he had given me months ago, silently praying he hadn't yet updated his security access. With a quiet beep, the lock disengaged. I exhaled sharply in relief, thanking Andrew's arrogance for the oversight. As I stepped into his apartment, an unsettling chill enveloped me. The air was cold and sterile, eerily immaculate, exactly like Andrew himself. The faint glow from his computer illuminated the neat workspace, revealing meticulously arranged documents and a framed photograph on the desk. Andrew's face smiling coldly back at me. My stomach tightened painfully. For a fleeting moment, a memory surged through my mind the last time I'd visited. We'd sat comfortably in this very room, sharing beers, laughing and discussing plans as friends. Now, the bitter contrast made my current predicament feel even colder and more surreal. Pushing those memories aside, I moved swiftly to the computer. I inserted my USB drive and began navigating through layers of heightened security. Each keystroke intensified my anxiety, my fingers trembling with urgency and adrenaline. Finally, I uncovered the hidden folder containing Andrew's encrypted communications email after email detailing multi-million-dollar transactions, classified documents, and names that sent chills down my spine. My breath quickened as I realized the gravity of the evidence now in my hands. Suddenly, my blood froze at the faint sound behind me, the unmistakable click of the apartment door opening, followed by the familiar, measured footsteps echoing softly across the hardwood floor. Andrew had returned. Earlier than expected, my body stiffened. Lungs halted mid-breath, heart nearly stopping altogether. My grip on the USB tightened painfully. Then Andrew's chilling, composed voice broke the silence, dripping with calculated menace. "Marcus, I know you're here. Did you honestly believe you could win this game?" I turned slowly, forcing myself to face Andrew. He stood calmly near the doorway, arms crossed, eyes glittering coldly in the dim glow from the computer screen. His relaxed posture was unnervingly confident, as though he'd anticipated this moment long before I did. "You surprise me, Marcus," Andrew said, a thin, mocking smile on his lips. "I thought you'd break sooner, but here you are, risking everything for some misguided notion of justice. Why, Andrew," I asked, my voice strained with anger and disbelief. "You had everything: a career, respect, power. Why throw it all away?" He laughed quietly, bitterly, shaking his head. "Throw it away? You think this company's worth saving? Open your eyes. Marcus, they're hypocrites, all of them, selling ideals in public, while privately cutting deals with foreign powers for profit. I merely decided I deserved my share." My breath caught sharply, the magnitude of his accusation hitting me hard. "What do you mean, cutting deals?" Andrew stepped closer, his voice dropping dangerously low. "You think you're innocent in this? You're just their latest scapegoat. You weren't framed just because you were convenient. It was because you're incorruptible, too honorable, too naive. They needed someone credible to take the fall once everything surfaced." His words chilled me to the bone, confirming my worst fears that my betrayal was orchestrated from the very top. "What exactly have you done?" I demanded, desperation edging into my voice. Andrew smirked, clearly savoring my shock. "This isn't merely about leaked data or corporate sabotage, Marcus. Information I've provided has national security implications. Once it's fully disclosed, the repercussions will ripple far beyond our little corner of the corporate world. Governments will tremble, markets will collapse, and when they do, certain individuals, myself included, will emerge far wealthier." I stood frozen, horrified by the enormity of his confession. Andrew's betrayal was deeper, darker, and infinitely more dangerous than I had imagined. My hand tightened reflexively around the USB drive, knowing it now contained proof not only of my innocence, but of an international conspiracy capable of toppling entire institutions. But Andrew noticed my subtle movement. His smile faded instantly, replaced by a chilling glare. "Hand it over, Marcus," he whispered threateningly. "This game has gone far enough." In that moment, I understood the stakes perfectly. I had to escape, not just to save myself, but to protect the truth before it was lost forever. I tightened my grip around the USB drive, my breath nearly stopping as Andrew's cold gaze locked onto mine. The room fell into a suffocating silence, so thick I could hear every frantic beat of my heart echoing loudly in my ears. Andrew took slow, deliberate steps toward me, each one forcing me further back against the edge of the desk. "Hand it over." "Marcus," he repeated, his voice low and dangerously authoritative. "You have no chance here." I stared defiantly into his eyes, forcing steadiness into my voice despite my dry throat. "You know I can't do that." Andrew's mouth twisted into a cruel smirk, his false patience instantly replaced by chilling ruthlessness. Without another word, he lunged forward, grabbing my wrist in a crushing grip. Wrenching at the USB, reflexively, I pulled back, pain shooting through my arm as we struggled violently, knocking a nearby chair crashing loudly onto the floor. In a surge of desperation, I shoved Andrew hard, sending him stumbling backwards into the wall. Seizing the brief opportunity, I bolted toward the door, but Andrew recovered faster than expected, grabbing my shoulder viciously from behind and pulling me backward with brute force. I lost balance, hitting the cold, hard floor heavily. The USB drive slipped from my fingers, skittering beneath the desk. Andrew instantly pinned me down, pressing his knee firmly onto my chest, his eyes now burned with fierce anger. Devoid of any humanity, "This is the worst mistake of your life," he hissed through gritted teeth. "Did you really think you could stand against all of this alone?" "Stop being so naive." I struggled to breathe under his weight, my vision blurring at the edges. My eyes darted frantically toward the USB drive, knowing that if I lost it now, everything would be finished. I needed to think fast, to act decisively. "I'm not the only one who knows." "Andrew," I gasped desperately, forcing confidence into my strained voice. "The evidence has already been sent out. Do you really think you're still in control?" Andrew's expression flickered momentarily with uncertainty, his knee easing slightly off my chest. Taking advantage of that split-second distraction, I summoned every last ounce of strength and pushed him aside, scrambling desperately toward the desk. My hand closed around the USB just as Andrew cursed angrily behind me. Without looking back, I dashed toward the door, adrenaline fueling every frantic step. Behind me, Andrew's footsteps pounded closer, each echoing like a death knell, reminding me that if caught again, I'd never get another chance. I froze just steps from the emergency exit, my hand gripping the icy metal handle. My throat felt painfully dry. My breathing quickened, and my heart pounded so violently I was sure Andrew could hear it from across the room. His voice, calm yet chillingly persuasive, halted me completely. "Think carefully, Marcus," Andrew called out softly. "If you walk out that door, you'll lose your only chance to know the entire truth." Slowly, reluctantly, I turned around, trying to hide my trembling hands. Andrew stood perfectly still, his eyes locked onto mine. For the first time, I saw genuine exhaustion in his expression, a faint, weary desperation that sharply contrasted with his usual cold confidence. "What truth?" "Andrew," I asked, my voice raspy, betraying my confusion and anger. "That you betrayed everyone, including me." Andrew stepped closer, rubbing his temples as though fighting off a relentless headache. "Don't you see I never intended for you to be hurt? We're all puppets in a hypocritical system. Marcus, the people running this company preach morality publicly, but privately, they sign the kind of shady deals you've witnessed with your own eyes." His words hit me hard. A memory suddenly surged forth a board meeting several months ago. The CEO had passionately spoken about corporate ethics and transparency. But later that same night, working late in the office, I'd stumbled upon suspicious emails detailing secretive and questionable transactions. At the time, I'd brushed it off, convincing myself I was just imagining things. Now that memory twisted painfully in my chest, fueling my rising doubt. Andrew continued, his voice gaining urgency. "Work with me, Marcus. You have all the evidence you need to bring everything to light, not only to clear your name, but to finally hold these hypocrites accountable." My mind spun violently, caught in a fierce internal battle between suspicion and hope. My fingers shook uncontrollably, my breathing growing more ragged by the second. A part of me desperately wanted to believe Andrew that perhaps together we could truly deliver justice, But how could I trust the very man who had recently tried to destroy my life? Why should I trust you? I asked desperately. Searching his face for any hint of sincerity, Andrew's expression turned intensely serious, his eyes never wavering from mine. Because right now, you have no other choice. Do you really think they'll let you go? They'll chase you relentlessly. Marcus, I can help you, but only if we cooperate can we truly change the game. I glanced again toward the emergency exit, feeling overwhelmed by the chaos in my thoughts. If I walked out that door now, how long would I last before they caught up to me? Could partnering with Andrew really be my last, best hope? Amid the internal storm, I realized this decision wasn't just about my survival. It had far-reaching implications for countless others trapped beneath the company's facade of integrity. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I braced myself. Preparing to make the most difficult choice of my life, I stood frozen by the emergency exit, my heart pounding violently in my chest, each beat resonating painfully in my ears. My hands felt ice cold, my entire body rigid under the unbearable weight of anxiety and fear. Andrew remained still, his eyes locked firmly onto mine, patient yet intensely expectant. Each passing second felt stretched into eternity as I grappled with a decision that could define the rest of my life. I can't trust you that easily. Andrew, I finally said, my voice quivering, each word painfully clawing its way out of my throat. You've already pushed me to the brink once. How do I know you won't betray me again? Andrew exhaled deeply, his shoulders visibly relaxing as if a heavy burden had been momentarily lifted. His gaze softened slightly, yet I still saw underlying tension behind those eyes. Marcus, I realize I've made terrible mistakes. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but understand this. I'm not your real enemy here. The people running this company will hunt you down relentlessly, alone. You have no chance against their power. A chilling thought flashed across my mind. If Andrew betrayed me again, there'd be no second chance. This time it would surely be fatal. Yet I was equally aware that if I stood alone against the immense force behind the company, I'd quickly be crushed. I stared deeply into Andrew's eyes, my internal struggle intensifying with each heartbeat, suppressing the doubt screaming inside me. I took a deep breath, gathered my remaining courage, and spoke carefully. If we work together, I began, forcing my voice to sound steadier despite its slight tremor. You must guarantee that our only goal is exposing the truth. No hidden motives, no more betrayals. Andrew visibly relaxed, exhaling a long-held breath of relief, his expression revealing genuine gratitude mixed with lingering tension. You have my word. Marcus, no more secrets, no more deception. This time, we're united for one purpose: to bring the real culprits into the light. The oppressive tension surrounding us eased slightly. Though the urgency remained palpable, Andrew swiftly pulled out his phone, his gaze sharpening with sudden, determined seriousness. We're running out of time. I'll arrange a safe place for us immediately. You must protect that evidence at all costs. We have to move tonight. I nodded firmly, struggling to suppress the lingering anxiety still gnawing at my gut. This was truly a life-and-death decision. Any small mistake could unravel everything. But there was no turning back now. I'd made my choice, and I was prepared to face the consequences until the very end. As soon as the decision was made, a wave of intense tension filled the room. Andrew immediately shifted into action mode, placing his phone down firmly, his voice quick and decisive. We don't have much time. Marcus, I've arranged a meeting with a trusted journalist at a small, quiet cafe deep within the old district. It's discreet enough that we'll notice if anyone is following us. But first, you need to back up and encrypt all the data immediately. I nodded, sitting down at the laptop, trying desperately to steady my shaking fingers as I quickly typed commands. Cold sweat broke out across my forehead, my heart pounding heavily against my ribcage. Every passing second pressed down on me relentlessly. I constantly glanced at the clock, feeling time turn against us. As I completed the final encryption steps, Andrew stood by the window, his eyes anxiously scanning the empty street below. His voice broke the tense silence, filled with an unmistakable edge of caution. They won't let us get away easily. I wouldn't be surprised if they already know exactly where we are. Once we leave this place, the real hunt will begin. Are you truly ready for this? I took a deep breath, nodding with determination. But before rising, a chilling thought flashed across my mind, forcing me to voice my deepest fears. If things don't go as planned, Andrew, it won't just be our freedom we lose. They'll hunt us down relentlessly and we might not make it out alive. Andrew turned sharply, his expression darkening under the weight of our grim reality. I know, he said quietly, his voice heavy with gravity, but this is the only path left to expose the truth. If we fail, we risk losing everything, but at least we won't have surrendered to their corruption. We stood silently for a moment, letting the harsh truth sink in. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, we immediately began our final preparations. I swiftly double-checked everything, the USB drive securely encrypted, my phone fully charged, spare battery packs, identification papers, and even an encrypted burner phone for worst-case scenarios. Finally, Andrew stepped toward me, extending his hand firmly. I shook it without hesitation, our grip strong and resolute, a silent promise that neither of us would back down, no matter the cost. Then, taking one final deep breath, we left the safety of the room behind. Stepping into the uncertain darkness ahead, I knew clearly that the trials awaiting us would be the most intense we'd ever faced. But now there was no hesitation left within me. I was ready to confront our fate no matter what consequences lay ahead. Dawn had barely broken. Pale rays of sunlight filtered through the thick fog, casting an eerie, unsettling glow on the old, narrow street. Andrew and I moved swiftly, continuously scanning our surroundings, our heartbeats quickening with every step. My throat was dry, my footsteps heavy, as though I were approaching a fateful confrontation. The small cafe sat hidden deep within a deserted alleyway, its dim, yellow lights illuminating our mounting anxiety. As we entered, I immediately felt the sharp gaze of the man sitting in the far corner, the journalist Andrew had contacted. He nodded subtly, signaling us to approach, but as soon as we took our seats, Andrew's phone vibrated urgently. He quickly glanced at the screen, his face turning pale in an instant. He met my eyes, his voice tense and urgent. "They've found us. We only have a few minutes." The journalist leaned forward sharply, sensing the imminent threat. "Do you have the evidence?" he whispered hurriedly. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I reached into my pocket to retrieve the USB. At that exact moment, my heart nearly stopped. Two shadowy figures appeared at the alley entrance. Both men wore dark coats, their faces expressionless, their swift, purposeful strides sending chills down my spine. I felt my chest tighten painfully. My breathing labored as panic surged within me. "They're here," I whispered hoarsely. Andrew instantly rose, inhaling deeply. His fists clenched at his sides, his eyes grew cold, determined, prepared for the inevitable. Turning sharply to me, he spoke in a low but unwavering voice. "Marcus, give the evidence to him and get out through the back door. I'll stall them as long as possible." I turned to Andrew, panic briefly flickering across my face. "What about you?" Andrew swiftly stepped toward me, gripping my shoulder firmly, his eyes locked intensely onto mine. "You have to survive. Marcus, if I don't make it, promise me you'll keep fighting until the whole truth comes out." I choked back a wave of emotion, my heart heavy with a painful realization this could be the last time I saw Andrew alive. I quickly pushed that thought aside, silently vowing that I wouldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. "I promise," I said firmly. Then, turning to the journalist, I handed him the USB. His hands shook slightly as he accepted it. Tension clearly etched across his face, yet his eyes shone with fierce determination. "Please protect this at all costs," I pleaded quietly. He nodded resolutely, quickly slipping the USB into his pocket. Simultaneously, Andrew turned and moved decisively toward the cafe entrance, positioning himself directly between me and our pursuers, creating a final barrier of protection. With no time left to hesitate, I bolted toward the back door, my breath coming in frantic gasps, my heart pounding violently in my chest. Behind me, the sounds of confrontation erupted, chairs clattering, footsteps scuffling. In that moment, I knew this decision would define everything, and now my life hinged entirely on the next steps I took. My heart pounded violently in my chest as I burst through the cafe's back door into the cold, deserted alley. The morning air stung my face sharply, silence hanging heavily around me, interrupted only by distant birdsong. A strange contrast to the chaos I'd just fled. My muscles screamed in protest, adrenaline burning through my veins. As panic surged within me, every step I took echoed loudly off the narrow walls, amplifying my fear. I couldn't stop picturing Andrew's face, determined and resolute as he stood defiantly between me and our pursuers. Guilt twisted painfully in my gut, a heavy weight of responsibility pressing down upon my shoulders. Suddenly, harsh voices carried through the silence, echoing behind me. "Check every alley." He couldn't have gone far. The voices sent chills racing down my spine. I pushed harder, taking a sharp left into an even narrower side street, pressing myself against the damp, cold bricks of the wall, struggling desperately to quiet my heavy breathing. My heart thudded painfully, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as footsteps rapidly approached. Seconds felt like an eternity. I stood frozen, every muscle aching, body trembling from exhaustion and fear. The pursuers moved closer, footsteps heavy and purposeful. Mere meters away from my hiding spot, I held my breath, praying silently, slowly. The footsteps passed, voices fading into the distance as they headed in the wrong direction. Relief flooded through me, brief but powerful. Yet I knew I wasn't safe, not yet. With trembling hands, I took out the encrypted burner phone Andrew had given me. My fingers shook slightly as I dialed the emergency number, anxiety gnawing at my mind. Could this call be traced? Had they already pinpointed my location? "It's Marcus Allen," I whispered urgently, my voice uneven and strained. "Andrew's compromised, probably captured. I need extraction immediately. I have the evidence, but I don't know how long I can stay hidden." A calm, reassuring voice replied promptly, "Understood. Remain exactly where you are. Help is en route. Do not move." I sank slowly to the ground, my back sliding down against the frigid bricks, every muscle burning with fatigue. My breath came in painful, rapid bursts, heart racing uncontrollably. I scanned the alley, eyes darting nervously at every shadow, every sound. As I sat waiting, Andrew's determined eyes haunted me once again. Guilt and grief surged through my chest, nearly overwhelming. But beneath those emotions burned a fierce resolve. I couldn't let his sacrifice go to waste, whatever the cost. I vowed silently, gripping the phone tightly. I would survive to reveal the truth no matter what it took. I sat motionless in the dark alley, my back pressed firmly against the cold, damp wall, every minute dragging on endlessly. Finally, the silence broke as the quiet rumble of an approaching car reached my ears. My heart leapt anxiously, breath held tightly in my chest until I heard a low, reassuring voice from the alley entrance. "Marcus Allen." "We're here to pick you up," I nodded cautiously. Stepping out from the shadows, two men in civilian clothes, serious and professional, quickly guided me into the waiting vehicle. As the car pulled away, relief surged briefly through me, soon replaced by an overwhelming wave of anxiety about Andrew's fate. The car took me swiftly to a secluded facility on the outskirts of the city, heavily guarded and discreet. Inside, I was led into a brightly lit, compact room where the journalist I'd met at the cafe waited alongside several investigative agents. Immediately, they began analyzing the data contained in the USB drive. As I sat silently, every passing second felt heavier. My mind was tortured by images of Andrew's determined expression and sacrifice. Eventually, the door opened, and the journalist stepped in, tension visible on his face, yet accompanied by a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Your evidence is solid, Marcus," he said confidently, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We have enough to go public immediately. The truth is finally about to be revealed." I took a deep, shaky breath, my body trembling slightly from the mix of relief and persistent anxiety. "And Andrew?" I asked hesitantly, my voice breaking slightly. He paused briefly, offering me a compassionate nod. "We just received word from the police Andrew was injured, but he's safe now. He's under tight protection at the hospital." Relief flooded through me, washing away some of the lingering dread that had gripped me ever since fleeing that alley. The following day, the story exploded across every major news outlet. The evidence I had provided rocked the company to its core. High-ranking executives were swiftly placed under investigation, their corrupt dealings exposed for all to see. Public outrage surged powerfully, demanding accountability and transparency from the company's leadership. Standing quietly by the window, gazing outside, a deep sense of relief intertwined with subtle sadness filled me. I knew the road ahead would still be long and difficult, but at least the truth had finally emerged. And Andrew's bravery and sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Justice, at last, had begun to prevail. Several weeks after the truth had come out, I found myself sitting quietly beside the hospital window, gazing out at a city that now felt entirely different. Gentle afternoon sunlight filtered through the glass, carrying a comforting warmth. The room was calm, filled only with the steady rhythm of the heart monitor nearby. I heard, "You're the hero now." A familiar voice spoke from behind, pulling me out of my tangled thoughts. I turned around, seeing Andrew leaning back against white pillows, his face pale but eyes still sharp and clear. I gave him a faint, weary smile and stepped a bit closer. "If it weren't for you, things would have turned out very differently," I said, gratitude clear in my voice. "You're the real hero here, Andrew." Andrew chuckled softly, a hint of sadness behind his eyes. "We were just doing what was right, but at least this time, we didn't fail." A gentle silence settled between us. My mind drifted back over the chaotic events of the past weeks. The fear, the uncertainty, the betrayal, and finally, the restoration of trust. I realized that while we had emerged victorious, the wounds and echoes left behind were profound. Andrew broke the silence first, his voice low and introspective. "Do you really think things will change, Marcus?" I considered his question carefully before responding with quiet determination. "At the very least, we forced people to confront the truth. They can't simply ignore it anymore. We've done our best now, it's their turn." Andrew nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Perhaps. At least we didn't compromise this time." I regarded the man sitting in front of me, my colleague, my friend who had once betrayed me, yet ultimately risked everything to save me. A complex wave of emotions, mingled with gratitude and forgiveness, welled up within me. After leaving the hospital, I walked slowly along the familiar streets, observing the busy people rushing past me. Life continued around me as if nothing had changed. Yet for me, everything was different now. I understood that we might never fully erase the mistakes of the past, but we could always choose how we confronted and corrected them. I looked upward into the clear, blue sky above, took a deep breath, and continued walking forward. The road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with new challenges, but at least now I was no longer alone. I had learned how to trust again, how to forgive, and above all, how to stand courageously for what was right. And for me, that was enough. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.